The following is a 15-minute preview of an interview about a publication entitled C.S. Lewis, Blurbologist. Welcome to Essential C.S. Lewis on YouTube, a feature of EssentialCSLewis.com. I'm William O'Flaherty. What would you say if I told you that there are words written by Lewis that have been hidden in plain sight that few people have noticed? Justin Keena is my guest today, and that's basically the premise behind the material he's published entitled C.S. Lewis, Blurbologist. It was released in 2025 from Inklings Studies Supplement number 4. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Thanks, William. Good to be here.
Well, now, let's begin with defining blurbologist, or more importantly, the word blurb. It's one of those words that most people may not realize that they are already familiar with. So what can you help us out with?
Yeah, people are certainly familiar with this word. I'd say it's at its core, it's a short descriptive summary of something, usually used for advertising purposes. So you could restrict it the way the Oxford English Dictionary does to a book, a blurb about a book, something that you print on a dust jacket or a wrapper. A concise plot summary or a short commendatory evaluation of it. But people are familiar with it all over the place. If you don't restrict it to a book, it's the little description you get on a Netflix show you're about to watch, or an Amazon product listing, or whatever it might be. Just that short, pithy, descriptive summary, usually designed to sell something to you. And in the case of Lewis's books, it's the short descriptive summaries that were printed on the dust jackets of his books.
Okay. Well, now, why do you think that what you've discovered has evaded the notice by the majority of people and even some Lewis scholars?
Yeah, well, first I'll say that some of them haven't gone unnoticed, but it's only because Lewis's name is attached to them. The one blurb on his own works that has been noticed before is the Till We Have Faces one, because there's, the publisher gave their summary and, very positive evaluation of this new novel. But then on a part of the rest of the blurb, it has, and Dr. Lewis writes, and it gives some words that are attributed directly to him. So I'd say the first thing is just that most of the blurbs, all the rest of the books that he published, don't say that he wrote them on it. So it's just, you open the front flap, you look at it, and it's a paragraph about the book. You're not going to give it a second thought if you're just trying to decide whether you want to read the book or not. It's a quick thing to read. The other thing is that most people nowadays will buy books for Lewis in trade paperback, or they're just not crazy collectors like, me or Steve Beebe, or, people who collect first editions and then are particular about getting a dust jacket. And, so some of these books are just lost to time. They're not in people's libraries. People don't have the fragile paper that was printed in, during World War II or before. To be able to read it. And the other thing is that even if they do have it, subsequent printings of the same original book will, condense the blurb or take it out and replace it with review quotes. So sometimes it only existed on the first couple of impressions, and then it's just gone. It's a very ephemeral medium. The genre itself is just, you print it on a piece of paper, it goes out in contemporary newspapers or magazines, and then it's just gone unless it's been preserved in someone's collection or in a library or archive. So I say it's hidden in plain sight, but only the plain sight of if you had the books in your shelf and you were looking at them all the time and had them in your mind. So yeah, and like I say, there had been a few that were noticed, but they had Lewis's name attached to them. So part of the excitement of discovering or deciding to look at the blurbs that he wrote for his own books is to think, I've got these texts. They sound like him. Were they really by him? In a way, it was a challenge, kind of like the opposite of what Charlie Starr is known for, where he can have a piece of paper with ink on it, and he can try to authenticate the handwriting, But for me, the challenge is the opposite. What if I have just the words, no writing? Can I authenticate it just based on the context of it's on this piece of paper that's attached to the original publication? What can I do to authenticate it without handwriting?
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes here. But it's interesting how you chose to summarize the key thoughts there, because only last week did it dawn on me. I thought, wait a minute, I don't have a true first edition of the Screwtape
Mhm.
letters, but I have the second printing, or that's what it's labeled, and
Right,
basically
right,
it's the second month or the second print. And sure enough, looking at your material,
right.
uh, I noticed that they didn't give the full blurb. They cut the bottom off of it, but that I did
Mhm.
have a thing that I never really thought about. Oh, well, that's something that Lewis wrote, or maybe that first sentence wasn't, but after that it was, and so
Yeah,
that was quite
exactly.
interesting. Yeah, so yeah, definitely a hidden in plain sight for those who maybe have a hardback edition. And I'll have to look at some of the other books that I have that are close to a printing that has the desk jacket.
And it was fun comparing them because I don't have all first editions. I've got, some that are like my screw tape. If you're going to buy a first edition screw tape, you've got some sizable disposable income. But if so that meant it meant a couple of things. Like number one, I noticed, I wanted to know which ones I had and which ones were different from the very first printings. But it also meant I had to track down the first printings. So getting in touch with libraries, sometimes they had facsimile reproductions, very difficult to find. I could only find one person who had a first edition, um, first printing, true first printing of the Allegory of Love. Even Spears and Bondage was easier to find
Huh.
because there was only one printing. It was easier to find a dust jacket of that particular book. But yeah, I had to make sure that each of the images that I assembled were from true first impression copies, and sometimes there are so many additional impressions that it's hard to find one that's truly original.
Hmm.
Yeah, but it made it fun. It gave me another fun reason to go back to my library and look at like who was reviewing it, what were people saying, how did they change and market his book. This is a whole new, um, not completely new. People have done Lewis reception studies, but it's a new angle of that kind of thing. People could take that in a further direction of looking at the evolution of different jackets and designs and how they were marketed for different countries and so on. So it's a whole nother thing that I had to just put aside and demarcate. Let me just find the original blurb. That's the most likely thing that Lewis would have written, and see if I can sift out anything maybe his editors wrote versus what really sounds like him and it resonates with the rest of his published and or known works.
Hmm. Yeah, very, very interesting, fascinating. Now, also hopefully maybe fascinating is how you came up with the idea for what we know now as the final result that came out in 2025. When did the seed was planted per se, or what do you recall? Because sometimes
Yeah,
it's
yeah, and
hard to reconstruct.
there's a couple of elements to it. The first thing, the main thing, is that I've been trying to collect every piece of published Lewis material that there is. And of course, the place to start is with the huge bibliographies that Walter Hooper made over the years. And having gone through all of those, line by line, uh, trying to find every essay, every quotation, every annotation of a book that's been published. There's quite a lot that's come out since his final bibliography and even since his last published collection of Lewis's works. All that to say, I got in touch with other Lewis bibliographers and the attempt to continue his work, particularly Steve Thorson. I was getting toward the end of the list of things that I needed to find, very obscure letters in journals or printouts of journal articles that had, one or two phrases or quotes from a Lewis, either a Lewis letter or some kind of note or fragment or something that's only available in the archives. And then I came down to finding some obscure differences between the first American and the first British printing of Till We Have Faces. Because it turns out that there's material in the first British printing that's not in the U.S. printing, and vice versa. Like, so there are like the note at the end about Cupid and Psyche, the genesis of the myth, and so on. That I don't think is in the first UK edition. I'll have to check my own book to remember the details because it gets complicated. All that to say, I came across on the front flap or the back flap of the dust jacket these words that were attributed to Lewis on the jacket, and it made me think, well, what if he's got words on other jackets, but that haven't been collected or documented yet? Now, it wasn't a totally novel idea because there is one person who had done an article expanding Lewis's bibliography, and the very first section of that short article, it's a few pages, is C.S. Lewis, the blurb writer. And he had found that Lewis wrote a couple of blurbs that Walter Hooper hadn't collected, but he also mentioned that, yeah, Lewis had written about a paragraph that appeared on Till We Have Faces. So that was at the back of my mind as well. Like, okay, I know he's written blurbs for other people. He's done stuff for his own books. And then at the back of my mind also was, the copy of Preface to Paradise Lost that I'd been reading for years and years has a paragraph on the front flap. And I'm the kind of person who will read, I'll read the back of it. I'll look at the front. I'll see, what the reviewers say and see if I agree or not. I'll read the plot summary or avoid it if it's a book I'm looking forward to. And that particular paragraph on the Preface to Paradise Lost jacket had stuck with me. And it sounded to me like Lewis, and I kind of had assumed that it was him for several years. And then I thought, at some point I wanted to, I can't remember what it was for, but a different project, I wanted to quote that, the idea came to mind where he talks about in that blurb wanting to remove obstacles to the enjoyment of Paradise Lost. And I thought, that's a great literary critical approach to take. And it just sounded like something that he would say. But, later on realizing, I can't quote this. People won't, you have to establish that Lewis actually wrote it if you're going to attribute it to him. And that was at the back of my mind. So there are a few things. And similarly, I remember seeing pictures of an early printing of Paralandra that very much sounded like Lewis, the printing of the jacket and the description of the book. And so those things were on my mind. And then I'm coming to, update my bibliography and realizing, maybe I just need to look systematically at the rest of the printed dust jackets and see what's there. And that's when I got excited about, let me go look through and see what I pulled, starting to pull things off my shelf and thinking, this sounds like Lewis, this sounds like so I remember specifically pulling off my shelf, it's easy to find a first edition of Letters to Malcolm, printed much later in his, actually posthumously it was published, but many more copies of it's pretty readily available. I remember pulling it off my shelf and thinking there's one or two sentences that just jumped out at me as Lewis wrote this. And then I went and typed them into a letter search engine, the collected letter search engine that I had made a few years previously, and it popped right up. So there was a letter that it was specifically pulled from to his publisher discussing how they were going to, move forward with the marketing, the dust jacket, and the production details and so on. That's when I'm like, okay, now I've got to look through it. And then just furiously, typing in all the blurbs that I could find, going through lists and online auctions and contacting collectors and people in the Lewis community who have these books that would give me pictures and so on. But yeah, that's the short answer. I was trying to come down with a definitive list of everything Lewis has published. And then I came across this, this tricky bit in the Till We Have Faces blurb that finally, that was the trigger that made me look through the rest of them.
I hope you enjoyed the first 15 minutes of my interview with Justin. The entire conversation was just over 60 minutes, and the full interview will be posted soon. There will be a link in the description when it is available. That's where you'll find a link on how to purchase a copy of C.S. Lewis Blurbologist as well. Thanks for watching EssentialCSLewis.com. Retake in 3, 2, 1. Thanks for watching Essential C.S. Lewis on YouTube, a feature of EssentialCSLewis.com. I'm William O'Flaherty. I also have a channel on YouTube called Adult Autism with William, where I share about only learning I was autistic at the age of 60, along with understanding Level 1 autism for adults. At EssentialCSLewis.com, you can find a variety of material, including various interviews with authors of titles related to Lewis. Please consider liking and sharing this video and subscribing to my channel. Plus, check the link in the description to learn more about my latest book, the Screwtape Letters Handbook.